Hello friends, BigSuperGood here. In today's State of the Investigator, we've landed on the true 1%er of Arkham, Preston Fairmont. Here's a quick reminder on my new grading system. Feel free to pause the video if you want to take a look. Rex is up there to show us what a grade of S looks like. Preston is the first socialite investigator and is part of one of the more famous cults in the Arkham universe, the Silver Twilight Lodge. We've seen Silver Twilight Acolytes since the core set, but their story was featured front and center with the Circle Undone Campaign. Preston didn't seem to care about his money until his father died in a car accident, and Carl Sanford asking to meet with him personally. Now he is dragged into the investigator role. Preston has stats of all ones, with a health sanity pool of 7 and 7. He has a deck size of 30, the options of rogue cards levels 0 to 5, survivors 0 to 2, neutral 0 to 5, but no illicit cards. He comes with family inheritance, a permanent asset that starts in play as permanents do. As an action, you can move all resources from this card to your resource pool. Forced when your turn begins, place 4 resources on this card. Resources on this card may be spent as if they were in your resource pool. Discard all resources from this card at the end of your turn. Thanks to his card pool and ability, Preston to me is closer to Wendy Adams and Safina Rousseau than a glass cannon reimagining of Jenny Barnes. Instead of saving big gobs of money, which is a thing he can do, it's just awkward, he can spend big on events and assets every single turn. Thanks to not having access to illicit cards, he has a big limitation in firepower, as most rogue weapons have that trait. I'll accept Garrote Wire as of this recording, and Survivor doesn't really have much outside of Fire Axe that makes sense for his low fight stat. To make up for that, he has access to arguably the best events in the game, and the ability to play them every single turn. For what he can do, he's incredibly consistent even though he relies on events and a few expensive assets. And when he gets XP, he's got access to Rogue, arguably the best pool of upgraded cards in the current game. The neatest part about family inheritance is that those resources do not count for several card interactions. Fire Axe does his extra damage, and Dark Horse provides its bonus regardless of resources on his inheritance. And those 4 resources don't count as gaining resources, which seems to get shut off in a lot of locations in Arkham. Preston's Elder Sign is insignificant. It is +0, you may spend 2 resources to automatically succeed instead. For it to matter, you have to be taking a test at -1 or worse and have 2 resources to spend. Most tests taken at a disadvantage is during the Mythos phase, when you don't have resources on family inheritance. If that happens, then you'll be glad to have this Elder Sign, but the odds of it happening are pretty low. For economy, Preston gets an A. As the millionaire, of course his resource economy is top tier. While he does have access to the fantastic rogue card pool for resource generation, he loses those resources at the end of the turn unless he spends an action moving them to his player card. Because of that, his more natural tact is to make do with his free 4 resources from family inheritance and upkeep resource. You could try Lone Wolf with him, just expect to lose some of its benefit. Preston has some of the best action economy in the game with XP to spend. Leo DeLuca is very affordable, as are the fast actions from Lola Santiago. Cat Burglar saves move actions and evade tests, and makes a good secondary ally with charisma. He has some card draw, but not a lot of card search. Rabbit's Foot and Take Heart are both very handy for draw. Preston gets an A for clue gathering. His burst clue gathering potential is incredible. He has a plethora of event tricks at his disposal, and once he gets XP, he can use busted cards like Lola Santiago and Streetwise. He has so many tricks for gathering clues and the resource economy to play them that he's very consistent. At low XP, you may have to use lesser cards like Flashlight and Old Keyring for lower shrouds. Newspaper is a decent option as well. The issue, of course, is his terrible Investigate stat. Even then, he'll generally have a solution for any level of shroud. Since his clue gathering comes from events and expensive assets, he's better the smaller the play group is. For a 3 to 4 player game, he has access to the underrated Skeleton Key, which reduces the shroud of a location to 1, making everybody a Cluver. Enemy management is a little tougher for Preston, and he gets a B- grade from me. Fire Axe is great for him since he has plenty of resources to spend, and resources on his inheritance do not block Fire Axe's damage increase. It is, however, the only really viable weapon for him thanks to a lack of illicit cards and a low base fight stat. It's much easier to use event tricks to get out of jams. Decoy is the best of these, but he has plenty more options. For scenarios with a lot of low HP enemies, Small Favor is nice as well. He can certainly afford to make the event expensive, and he has good stats to tank attacks of opportunity if necessary. Trial by Fire, Dig Deep, and Rise to the Occasion are multi-purpose cards that can be used for enemy management. Small Favor is especially good against low HP aloof enemies. With XP, you can try Mist Oil or Cat Burglar. I'd recommend Charisma so that you can run them alongside Leo DeLuca or Lola Santiago, and 2 copies of Charisma are perfectly fine as well. Overall, Preston's card pool steers him towards evasion more than monster killing, although Fire Axe is decent with him. In multiplayer, he will almost never be your boss killer as good as Fire Axe is. Encounter card defense is what makes Preston a balanced investigator, and this gets a C- grade for me. He's not useless against encounter cards, but it's important to note that during the Mythos phase, you don't have resources on family inheritance. So while you can use cards like Dig Deep to pump up your skills, don't count on inheritance resources during the Mythos phase. If a scenario is especially punishing with willpower checks, you may want to build resources on Preston's player card for Dig Deep. One nice thing in his favor is the ability to ignore a few classic encounter cards. Locked Door, for example, says you cannot investigate, but Preston with Lola Santiago rarely investigates. If you have Leo DeLuca out, spending double actions to clear encounter cards isn't a big deal. In multiplayer, you can use You Handle This One to let somebody else deal with your problems. And like any low willpower investigator with access to You Handle This One, a pairing with a high willpower investigator is a good idea. Further insult to injury, he cannot run Tennessee Sour Mash as it's illicit. Skill testing is a category parallel to encounter card defense. Many key locations in Arkham require skill tests, as well as parlay actions and the B-sides to act in agenda cards. Preston at all ones isn't going to naturally be great at this category. However, his mass of rogue and survivor cards can help him. If parlay is a concern, Find Clothes is a good start. I find myself running Find Clothes in a lot of my decks anyways. It's cheap, I'm not usually using the body slot, and at worst it tanks a horror or damage for you. Dig Deep is a good option for him and will help willpower and agility checks. In solo, you can hold on to cards to pass key checks, and in multiplayer, hopefully you have a teammate who can pass those tests for you. If you are willing to pay a lot of experience, or aren't playing with the taboo list, Streetwise can help with intellect and agility tests. A C+ grade feels appropriate. Preston is fairly tanky, getting a B+ grade for the category. 7 health and 7 sanity is quite the luxury, and going from one investigator with 7s to someone like Daisy Walker with 5 health or Silas Marsh with 5 sanity is jarring to say the least. Preston has access to and can afford plenty of allies to take hits from as well. If you are especially worried about damage and horror, he has self-healing allies like Peter Silvestri and Jessica Hyde. Thermos is prohibitively expensive to most, but Preston can easily afford it. It's also a great card to throw in your deck later in campaigns with Adaptable. Support potential is the investigator's ability to help a group beyond clue gathering and enemy management. Losing Illicit means he doesn't have access to Liquid Courage, a card I find underrated. As previously mentioned, Thermos is a nice healing option. His best supporting options come with XP in the Skeleton Key and the Gold Pocket Watch. I'll give him a C-, a few good cards, but not really going to help a group beyond his share of proactive actions. Preston's signature weakness is Lodge Debts. Lodge Debts is a 10 cost event with the Pact trait. Remove Lodge Debts from the game. Forced, when the game ends or you are eliminated, if Lodge Debts is still in your hand, you suffer 1 mental trauma. If you're running him to hold on to resources, this card won't be a big deal. If you aren't doing this, Lodge Debts can be annoying. You'll have to spend 1 to 2 turns saving up money from family inheritance to pay his debts. Preston depends on those resources, so it's almost like losing a couple of turns. Still, I'd say this is not quite as bad as similar weaknesses like Cover Up, Searching for Izzy, and Angered Spirits. Preston will always have the ability to get rid of Lodge Debts, it's just annoying to do so. At 7 starting sanity, ignoring debts is viable at times. It gets a B. The first 2 deck lists are for true solo. At 0 XP, you'll have to use cards like Flashlight, Gravedigger's Shovel, and eventually Old Keyring to grab clues. Fire Axe is always a card to mulligan for, as are evasion options. You may want to throw Stray Cat into the secondary ally slot if you find evasion an issue, or Peter Silvestri if you're facing a lot of horror damage. Lone Wolf may be okay for some extra resources, just don't expect to use them every single turn. My League of Extraordinary Investigator deck utilizes Charisma, Lola Santiago, and Streetwise to add consistency, and of course, Lola Santiago plus resources is absurdly good. Next is a bit of a decadent idea with Double Double and rogue cards like Easy Mark and Hot Streak. Fire Axe loses its viability since you'll be holding on to resources here. You can add You Handle This One for a bit of protection if you prefer. It does take 29 XP, which means 2 extra basic weaknesses. My 4-player idea is for an 18 XP list, just using Lola Santiago, the Gold Pocket Watch, and the Skeleton Key. It is missing Charisma, so if you don't mind another basic weakness, go ahead and add it. Finally, here's an idea for a 0 XP deck with a limited card pool. When thinking about limited card pools, I tend to ignore taboo lists, so cards like Elusive and Drawing Thin make their appearances here. This deck will look to build up resources to use cards like Well Connected and Money Talks. To be honest, it's not a deck I have much confidence in, since you are missing Fire Axe, Scrounge for Supplies, and eventually Lola Santiago and Charisma. I'd personally recommend new players to buy campaign cards in chronological order, in which case Preston will be fine with your collection by that point. Why play Preston? I believe he's a top-tier solo investigator, not a fantastic fighter but has everything else going for him, except for encounter cards of course. Playing high-cost events with impunity is fun, and Rogue Survivor card pool is a potent combination. I hope you enjoyed the new format. Next up, I'm looking at Rex Murphy, the second Seeker released in the game. I'm Big Stupid Grin, hope you had a good time here, and until next time, have a good one.